JFK tells the supposed true story,
Well, don't get me started on that.
of Jim Garrison, played by Kevin Costner, a district attorney tasked with investigating the murder of President John F. Kennedy in 1963. However, as he dives deeper into the case, he begins to suspect that all is not as it seems, believing that the supposed soul killer, Lee Harvey Oswald, played by Gary Oldman, didn't act alone, and it's up to Garrison to get to the bottom of this mystery and uncover who murdered the president. Oh, and it also stars Kevin Bacon, Tommy Lee Jones, Joe Pesci, Laurie Metcalf, Michael Rooker, Jack Lemmon, Walter Matthau, Vincent D'Onofrio, Wayne Knight, John Candy, Sissy Spacek, and Donald Sutherland. Who isn't in this movie?
I can't believe it.
The film's Inception started all the way back in 1987 when Zachary Sklar, a professor at the Columbia School of Journalism, met with the real-life Jim Garrison to help him rewrite a manuscript he was working on about the Kennedy assassination, eventually getting the book published in 1988. At around the same time, writer and director Oliver Stone was attending the Latin American Film Festival in Cuba, where he met the book's publisher Ellen Ray in a lift. She gave Stone a copy of Garrison's book to read, and he was so drawn into the story that he immediately bought the film rights for $250,000 of his own money to prevent anyone else getting their hands on it.
You better believe it.
Stone had always been fascinated by the Kennedy assassination, but stated that he wasn't interested in making a paint-by-numbers biopic about Garrison's life. Rather, he wanted to tell the story behind the conspiracy to kill the president. Once he had a hold of the film rights, Stone organised a meeting with Garrison where the director grilled him for over 3 hours about the case and his leads. However, Garrison didn't take kindly to Stone's questioning and eventually left, but this actually increased the director's admiration for him as he was impressed with Garrison's pride and dignity. Garrison made many mistakes. He trusted a lot of weirdos and followed a lot of fake leads, but he went out on a limb, way out, and he kept going even when he knew he was facing long odds. So after pestering the man with fake leads, Stone thought, fuck him, I'm gonna make some more of my own.
Hold your horses.
In addition to Garrison's writing, Stone also bought the rights to Jim Maher's book, Crossfire, The Plot That Killed Kennedy, a collection of written theories surrounding Kennedy's murder, and used both books as a reference point when conducting his research. Though Maher's book detailed many theories about the case, Stone was eager to find out more and hired Jane Rusconi, a recent graduate of Yale University, to lead a research team in assembling as much information about the assassination as possible, while the director completed post-production on his previous film, Born on the 4th of July. It's estimated that Stone and his team read between 100 and 200 books in preparation for the film.
It's important.
By December 1989, Stone had completed his research and began shopping the film around to various studios. He met with some executives at Warner Brothers who wanted him to make a biopic about Howard Hughes, but upon finding out they couldn't get the rights, Stone pitched them his latest project instead. The head of Warner's at the time was Terry Semel, who had gained a reputation for producing controversial and politically charged films such as All the President's Men, The Parallax View, and The Killing Fields, which Stone took a liking to. So he pitched his story to him and he loved it and instantly agreed to put up $20 million for the budget.
Oh, thank you, honey.
Now that he had financing secured, Stone set out to properly write the screenplay. He reached out to Sklar, the professor who edited both Garrison's and Maher's books, to help him combine the two volumes, as well as his team's extensive research, into one script, telling the professor that he wanted the film to be a great detective movie combining Z with Rashomon. Somehow I had the impression that in Z you had the showing of the crime, and then the re-showing of the crime throughout the picture until it was seen another way. That was the idea of JFK. That was the essence of it. Basically, that's why I called it JFK, not J.F.K. JFK. It was a code, like Z was a code for He Lives American style. As it was written, it became more fascinating. It evolved into 4 DNA threads.
Thanks for straightening it out for us.
When writing the script, Stone broke the film structure down into 4 stories. Garrison investigating the New Orleans connection to the assassination, the research that revealed Oswald's backstory, the recreation of the assassination itself, and the information that the character of Mr. X imparts onto Garrison.
I could give you a false name, but I won't. Just call me X.
Or as my friends call me, Twitter. The work was then divided up between 2 writers. Sklar would work on the Garrison side of the story, while Stone added in everything else. In fact, Sklar's first draft of the script was 550 pages long, though this was eventually shortened by Stone to a more reasonable 156 pages, mostly by condensing multiple characters into one. Yeah, more reasonable. 156 pages should equate to 156 minutes on screen. It's 206!
What is the difference?
When casting the role of Garrison, both Harrison Ford and Mel Gibson were sent copies of the script, but they both turned it down. Jeff Bridges was then proposed, but he was rejected by Warner Brothers, as they didn't consider him to be a box office draw. Nick Nolte was then considered, but this was abandoned after he was deemed too old. Don Johnson actively campaigned for the part, but Stone felt that his public image from Miami Vice would make it difficult for the audience to buy him as Garrison. So they didn't want Jeff Bridges because he wasn't famous enough, but they didn't want Don Johnson because he was too famous.
Fuck you, motherfucker.
And other considerations included Alec Baldwin, Tom Berenger, Robert De Niro, Gene Hackman, Michael Douglas, Dennis Quaid, Robert Redford, and Robin Williams. In the end, Stone approached Kevin Costner, having been impressed by his performance in The Untouchables. Costner actually turned the film down at first, but his agent was so impressed by the project that he helped the director convince him to take it. Though Warner Brothers initially doubted this choice, but their fears were quickly settled when Costner's previous film, Dances with Wolves, won 7 Oscars including Best Picture, thereby making him a bankable star.
Fuck yeah.
For the part of Oswald, Charlie Sheen, D.B. Sweeney and Tom Cruise were considered, before Frank Whaley was cast. However, he was forced to drop out due to scheduling conflicts and was replaced by Gary Oldman, though as a compromise Whaley was then recast in a smaller role as Oswald's imposter instead. Robert Loggia, Paul Newman, Peter O'Toole and Roy Scheider were all considered to play Clayshaw, before Tommy Lee Jones, a close personal friend of Stone's, was given the part instead. He had initially offered a different role that was eventually cut from later drafts of the script, until he was finally given the key role of Clay. For the role of David Ferry, Stone wanted to cast James Wood, but he would only sign on to the film if he could play Garrison instead. And he also wanted the film to be a more traditional biopic about Garrison's life, rather than the assassination, but Stone refused. Willem Dafoe, Martin Landau, Jeff Goldblum and John Malkovich were then considered, before the role was eventually played by Joe Pesci. But if you want something even crazier, Marlon Brando was actually the first choice for Mr. X, but he turned the part down due to lack of interest in the story, leading to Donald Sutherland taking over instead.
Makes sense.
Once the actors had been cast, many of them underwent extensive research for their roles. Costner and Jones in particular met up with the real Garrison multiple times to interview him, as well as his friends and enemies, in order to understand the psyche of their characters. However, by far the most impressive in terms of research was Gary Oldman. According to him, the script didn't provide much about who Lee Harvey Oswald was, which gave him the freedom to shape the character however he wanted. Stone gave him several plane tickets and a list of contacts in order to conduct his own research, even meeting with Oswald's real-life wife and daughters to prepare for the role.
Can't say that comes as a surprise anymore.
Filming began in April 1991 and lasted 72 days, and Stone was such a stickler for detail that he even went as far as to film certain scenes at the real locations where they actually took place, such as Oswald's arrest at the Texas Theater and his murder by Jack Ruby in Dallas City Hall. Stone even spent $4 million restoring Dealey Plaza to 1963 conditions, and when shooting the assassination sequence, the producers had to pay the Dallas City Council a huge amount of money to reroute traffic for 3 weeks so that the scene could be filmed undisturbed. However, it wasn't all easy going. Even before filming had finished, many major American newspapers caught wind of the nature of the story and began publishing articles lambasting Stone and the production for skewing historical facts. This began to concern the studio, as they felt this would impact the movie's potential earnings at the box office. Furthermore, Stone had garnered a reputation for being a very demanding director, often filming an endless amount of takes, sometimes with up to 5 cameras operating at once. Joe Pesci in particular hated the experience so much that he vowed to never work with the director again.
Why don't we drop this subject?
JFK was released on December the 20th, 1991, because nothing screams Merry Christmas like the assassination of the president.
Doesn't add up, does it?
And despite a low opening weekend, the movie gradually gained more momentum at the box office over the coming weeks, ending its run with a worldwide gross of $205 million. In general, reviews were positive, praising the acting, filmmaking, and John Williams' score. However, the main point of contention was its numerous historical inaccuracies, particularly the film's willingness to embrace conspiracy theories. In particular, many of the people who were involved in the real-life investigation slated the film. Harry Connick Sr., the district attorney who defeated Garrison in court in 1973, heavily criticized Stone's view of the assassination, saying that the director was either unaware of the details of the Clayshaw investigation and trial, or if he was aware, that didn't get in the way of what he perceived to be the way the case should have been. Famed Kennedy historian David R. Rohn declared that at least 80% of the film was flat out fictional. David Beelan of the Warren Commission, the team that investigated the assassination, referred to the movie as manufactured facts, even comparing the director to Hitler. Ouch! And even Kennedy's own son, John Jr., flat out refused to watch it.
Bullshit, man.
Stone's response to the controversy seemed to have varied over time. Before it even came out, he stated, "I've taken dramatic license. It's not a true story per se. It is not the Jim Garrison story. It is a film called JFK. It explores all the possible scenarios of why Kennedy was killed, who killed him, and why." So you read 9,000 books, flew across the country to meet the real-life friends and family of those involved, did a shit ton of research, filmed scenes at the actual locations, but it wasn't supposed to be based on fact.
I don't think so.
However, in later interviews, Stone insisted that nothing that appears in the movie was fabricated, but rather based on real historical evidence from his research, even going as far as to publish an annotated version of the screenplay in which he justifies and cites sources for every claim he made in the film.
Look at this bullshit. He keeps changing what he says.
Despite the film's controversial status, it went on to be nominated for 8 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, winning Best Cinematography and Best Film Editing. Roger Ebert named it the best film of 1991. So just to be clear, Terminator 2, Silence of the Lambs, Boys in the Hood, Beauty and the Beast, Hot Shots, Thelma and Louise, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, they all came out in 1991, right? Hell, I'd even take Ernest Scared Stupid!
I don't think so.
And Stone himself declared it his favourite movie of all that he has made. You made Natural Born Killers!
It's difficult to accept this.
In fact, it was the release of this that led to the 1992 Assassinations Disclosure Act, in which the American public were allowed to see important documents regarding JFK's assassination in the period of 25 years. And in October 2017, the Trump administration released a great part of these documents known as the JFK files.
This could be it.
But let's not beat around the bush here. Is this movie historically accurate? No. No, it's not. But to be fair, they show Oswald going to Mexico at one point. Well, that's true, he did go to Mexico. They portray the route that Oswald took after assassinating the president. That's the real route. So it's not all bad. First off, the movie seems to have a really weird rose-tinted view of Kennedy, portraying him as a saint-like progressive figure in politics.
He did so much for this country, for colored people.
But that really wasn't the case. In fact, JFK was actually quite late to embrace the civil rights movement. He initially voted against the Civil Rights Act at first, and it was only when he needed African American votes that he finally started to take it more seriously. And then there's the portrayal of Lee Harvey Oswald. The film states that Oswald was fluent in Russian, and though he did teach himself rudimentary Russian during his time as a soldier, his skills were poor and he even failed a Russian writing and speaking test assigned to him by the army. But the movie makes out like he was an expert.
Lee Oswald was trained in the Russian language when he was a Marine.
In fact, the film states that Marina, Oswald's eventual wife, thought he was a native speaker of Russian when they first met, but this isn't true. Marina not only knew that Oswald wasn't Russian, but this actually made him more attractive to her, as she thought that a foreign man would treat her better than a Russian would.
He's discharged from the Marines, supposedly because his mother's sick. Stays home 3 days.
Well, actually, he stayed with his mother for 2 days and not 3. The movie also depicts Jack Ruby shouting "Oswald!" when he shoots him, but this also never happened. In fact, he didn't even yell anything at all. This character, Mr. X, played by Sutherland, is actually a mix of 2 people. Richard Case Nagel, a former CIA double agent who claimed to have foreknowledge of Kennedy's assassination, and Fletcher Prouty, a former Air Force colonel who believed the assassination was a coup d'etat by members of the US government to stop Kennedy from taking control of the CIA, who also served as one of the film's many consultants. Similarly, the character of Willie O'Keefe, played by Kevin Bacon, a gay male prostitute who claims to have seen Oswald, Clay Shaw and David Ferry attend gay orgy parties, is a complete creation of the filmmakers. He's a stand-in for several of Garrison's key witnesses, mostly Perry Russo, who in real life was a heterosexual insurance agent and had no inside knowledge of Shaw's personal life, nor of any supposed sex parties, claiming to have only ever seen him from a distance. Furthermore, David Ferry's confession about his relationship with Oswald in the Fontainebleau Hotel never happened. Ferry maintained to his grave that he never met Oswald, nor knew anything of a plot to kill the president. The spy camera that is shown in the movie, supposedly prior to the assassination, is a Minox 6, which wasn't invented until 1969. Okay, that was a bit of a nitpick, but I'm just saying, Ollie, don't lie.
I'm lost, boss.
Then there's the trial of Clay Shaw, which has its own host of inaccuracies. To start, they don't include the fact that Garrison administered sodium pentothal and hypnotized Bacon's real-life equivalent into eliciting the memory of Clay Shaw, Lee Harvey Oswald and David Ferrie discussing wanting to kill Kennedy in 1963 during a party. And this was viewed as one of the main reasons Garrison lost, and it was omitted from the movie to make Garrison's case seem more plausible. In Garrison's closing speech to the court in Clay Shaw's trial, he refers to the government proving the magic bullet theory with some fancy physics and a nuclear laboratory. A neutron activation analysis of the bullet fragments was carried out by the House Special Committee on Assassinations, but this didn't happen until 1977, so it makes no sense why Garrison would mention this in '69. The movie also implies that the jury essentially believed Garrison's theory of a conspiracy, but acquitted Shaw on a technicality. But in reality, the jury not only disbelieved Garrison's theory of the crime, but the trial had made them look more favourably on the Warren Commission report, which posts Oswald as the lone shooter.
Now don't tell me you don't remember that.
When they're investigating the location of the shooting, Garrison's assistant tells him that it takes a minimum of 2.3 seconds to recycle the Carcano rifle used by Oswald. While this is accurate for the initial Warren report in 1964, the HSCA concluded in 1977 that it was possible to reload the rifle within 1.66 seconds using the open iron sights. Though to be fair, the characters in the film wouldn't know this back then, but Stone did, so it still counts.
That's clear.
The film also alludes to the so-called Umbrella Man as being part of the conspiracy, possibly acting a signal for the shooters since he is standing so close to the limousine as Kennedy is shot, but the implication is that he and his motives were never identified. However, in the late 70s, about 10 years after Clay Shaw's trial, he was identified as Louis Stephen Witt and testified before the House Select Committee. Apparently Witt opened his umbrella as Kennedy drove by, not for any sinister reasons, but to protest against Kennedy's father, Joseph P. Kennedy, who was an ambassador to Britain, and is a reference to former British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain's umbrella.
I saw a man shooting from over there behind that fence. Now what are you going to do about that? You got to go out there and get him.
We have that taken care of. You only heard 3 shots, and you're not to talk about this with anybody.
Yeah, this never happened. The thing is, when you entertain conspiracy theories because there are so many out there, fair enough, but when you're specifically showing eyewitness accounts being silenced by the government with no factual evidence of it, that's where it becomes ridiculous.
I didn't say that.
Although apparently they had Photoshop in the 1960s. Who could edit photos this well back then? But other than all of that, it's completely accurate.
Hell no.
In fact, the film gives credit to a lot of conspiracy theories surrounding the JFK assassination, which in of itself is fine to include as it's difficult to make a picture on JFK's death without discussing them, but to get all of the basic facts wrong is just ridiculous and kind of insulting to a man who lost his life. It's not like The Social Network where the real life story was so boring that they had to make up shit to heighten the drama. This is the most famous assassination in all of human history. Why did you need to make up shit to make it interesting?
Bullshit.
The movie does begin with a nice little history lesson on the real-life JFK, and I will say the film has a very nice look. There are some quite creative and artistic choices when it comes to cinematography. It just looks really cool, I'll give it that. Cinematically, it is really creative. Just ignore the script and you'll be fine. It's a cool style that he was clearly testing out before Natural Born Killers, with switching back and forth between colour and black and white. Except for these random ass slow-mos mid-scene. Oh, he's being artsy again! But the acting is sometimes very questionable. Especially when Costner found out that the president has just been killed.
Boss, the president's been shot. In Dallas 5 minutes ago.
Oh no.
Oh shucks, what are we gonna do?
The president was shot.
A bullshit president.
Ah, much better. In fact, a lot of the film is Costner attempting to react convincingly, and it really doesn't work. Seriously, does he even know how to human?
Sometimes I feel like I didn't ever love you or the children.
Yeah, maybe don't moan out the president's name while you're trying to bang your wife. I do think it's a great idea for a film, showing the public reaction to such a massive story. It's really interesting. And it's cool to see all these people from different backgrounds arguing over if JFK was good or not, and whether Oswald was even in the right. And they do have some genuinely decent dialogue.
You tell me how the hell you gonna keep a conspiracy going on between the mob, the CIA, the FBI, and Army intelligence, and who the hell knows what else, when you know for a fact you can't keep a secret in this this room between 12 people.
Gary Oldman dissolves into this role. He is incredible and looks and sounds like the real guy. In fact, after making the film, Gary Oldman had actually become convinced that Oswald wasn't the lone gunman, though he has since changed his stance.
What?
Joe Pesci is a lot of fun in this, even with the worst eyebrows in the world, looking like a little old lady named Margaret. He's such a bad liar. He is hilarious, even when he's not meaning to be.
Yes, I remember now. I'm sorry, Mr. Garrison. I got confused. Why? What's wrong?
Dave, I find your story simply not believable.
Really?
The performance is actually great as he becomes this paranoid, neurotic mess, worried that he's going to be killed due to his connection to Oswald. Even though he never knew Oswald! There is a pretty cool scene as he and some others start planning the assassination. I mean, sure, it's not accurate, but it does have some pretty cool moments. If it was about a fictitious assassination, it'd be pretty good. And if it wasn't 3 weeks long! That's the thing, it's edited together really well. They consider a second shooter and we get a flashback reenactment, and it's really well made. But my god, the southern accents are really annoying in this.
We've all tried so hard to put it out of our minds, you just keep digging it up again.
Hey y'all, I'm from Texas. I'm gonna go fishing and then eat some stew.
Is he a father there? Is he a coal miner? Does he stink of the land?
Why do they all sound like Foghorn Leghorn from the Looney Tunes?
The Masquerade Bar? Dave Ferry took me there for the express reason to meet him.
Sexual purposes.
Well, yeah.
Come over here, boy, and I'll show you how to make a nice paper aeroplane.
But it is quite interesting as they speak to different witnesses who detail their point of view from that day. It's put together really well. If only it was accurate! And you feel for Costner's character as he has nightmares about the shooting and it's completely haunted his life. It's really intense. But to be honest, Tommy Lee Jones surprises me and he gives a very solid performance in this. But my god, what's he done to his hair? Yeah, I'm not taking him seriously, looking like Eric Bischoff. And Kevin Bacon's is just as bad. Man, what the hell were the makeup and hair team doing in this film? And the accent coaches? It's cool to see all of these big names pop up, but my god, John Candy is sweating like Jimmy Savile in a playground. This was actually because he was so nervous to be acting opposite such famous actors that he genuinely was intimidated.
Anybody told you that has to be crazy.
The problem is, the style wears off after a while. If it were 2 hours, maybe 2.5 at a push, it'd be pretty good. But the fact that it's stretched out to over 3, the director's cut being 3.5, is ridiculous. Some scenes last 11 minutes for crying out loud. So while the recreations of the shooting are really well done, when it's just repeated discussions over and over again for so fucking long, it's a chore to get to the good parts. They try to recreate the shooting themselves to time each other to see if it's possible, and it is quite interesting. It reminds me of 12 Angry Men in the sense that they're just trying to test the theories to see if this could have actually been done. They speculate the trajectory of Oswald, how many shooters needed. See, this stuff is really cool. And there's another one where Mr. Instagram starts going over all of the mistakes that were made that day by the government to prevent Kennedy's safety, which is really interesting. But then it just keeps on going. Man, memorizing this must have been a real bitch. The thing is, this part was originally scripted and shot as 2 different scenes. The second one occurring after Garrison had lost the case, which would have been the final scene of the film. But during post-production, the 2 scenes were weaved into one. Donald Sutherland's monologue spanned 16 minutes and was memorized and performed in a single take. No! Why are you leaving? You still need to recite War and Peace!
Martin Luther King was killed in Memphis.
Honey, your daughter's life's just been threatened.
Just a crank making calls. Happens a dozen times a day at the office.
Oh, Jim, a kidnapper, a murderer, who knows
only
what?
cowards make crank calls.
1. Why do Americans say crank calls? Like someone's pranking you with a call and you call them crank calls. Can you do anything right? 2. Someone literally made a crank call right before JFK got shot. Dumbass.
Telling the truth can be a scary thing sometimes. It scared President Kennedy, and he was a brave man. But if you let yourself be too scared, then you let the bad guys take over the country, don't you?
Wow, Obama must have been fucking terrified. It just drags beyond belief, and there's no need to prolong it this much. About 10 months into the film, there is a decent scene as Tommy Lee Jones gets questioned in court as he was spotted helping Oswald, and this is pretty intense.
Theoretical physics can prove that an elephant can hang from a cliff with his tail tied to a daisy.
What? So it is a really well done sequence as he lists all of the witnesses who testified that there was an extra gunman.
So what really happened that day? Let's just for a moment speculate, shall we?
You spent 3 hours speculating, for the love of God! This 12-month-long monologue from Costner was also done in a single take. But it never happened in real life. It's a combination of several speeches he made, as well as excerpts from his book. This is what's weird. They discuss the multiple gunman theory and the magic bullet, and this is speculation, which is fine. But the movie constantly portrays stuff as fact, which isn't. When the film shines, it's really good, but then there's a lot of bullshit that drags it back down. The movie outstays its welcome and drags far too much. I'd say it's okay. There's too many lies for my liking, and it's focused way too much on padding it out than telling a concise story. It has its moments, but overall it's a painfully boring, monotonous, and painfully mediocre snooze fest. And now, if you head over to the Seeking Answers channel, you'll see a documentary on JFK. Depending on when this comes out, maybe it's this Sunday, maybe in a few days you'll see it. I don't know how I'm going to time these.